The shadow is something inferior, primitive, inadequate, and inconvenient, but not absolutely evil. It is human, and without it, we would not be complete. Carl Jung. Many people go through life searching for a purpose that gives meaning to their existence. For some, this purpose is tied to external achievements, a prestigious job, a comfortable home, the recognition of others, or the accumulation of material possessions. However, it's common that even after attaining these goals, an emptiness persists, as if something essential is still missing. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers in modern psychology, offers a transformative perspective on this matter with his famous statement, "He who looks outward dreams, but he who looks inward awakens." This assertion suggests that the true meaning of life lies not in the things we seek in the external world, but in the inner journey of understanding who we are at our deepest core, including the parts of ourselves we prefer to ignore or hide. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow to describe these hidden aspects of the personality. The shadow consists of everything we reject about ourselves, traits, desires, emotions, or impulses that we deem unacceptable, either out of fear of others' judgment or because they don't align with the idealized image we've constructed of who we are or should be. It might be the anger we suppress to appear kind, the vulnerability we conceal to seem strong, or even the ambition we deny out of fear of appearing selfish. Repressing these elements, however, doesn't make them disappear. They continue to operate in our unconscious, shaping our choices and relationships in ways we often don't even notice. Ignoring the shadow is like trying to assemble a puzzle with missing pieces. The picture will never be complete. Living fully and authentically requires the courage to confront these rejected parts and accept them as an integral part of who we are. This content is an invitation to explore this path of self-knowledge, delving into the darkness of the shadow to find light and meaning. It's not just about recognizing flaws or weaknesses, but about discovering a dormant potential that, when integrated, allows us to transcend the limitations imposed by a superficial life. The journey of shadow integration is, therefore, a process of awakening, a call to abandon the illusions of the ego and embrace the totality of our being, with all its contradictions and richness. The shadow, as conceived by Carl Jung, is the repository of the unconscious, where we store everything we don't want or can't accept about ourselves. These are personality traits, repressed desires, intense emotions, or instinctual impulses that we judge as inappropriate or dangerous. Imagine a person who prides themselves on their patience and kindness. They might suppress their natural aggressiveness, pushing it into the shadow because they fear it would make them seem less virtuous. Or someone who values independence above all might hide their need for emotional support, considering it an unworthy weakness. These aspects don't vanish. They simply remain out of conscious reach, yet they continue to influence our actions in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. Jung described the shadow as that little bearer of light, a powerful metaphor that reveals the transformative potential hidden in these obscure corners of the psyche. Rather than being merely a burden, the shadow holds creative energy and vitality that, when acknowledged, can propel us toward growth. However, confronting it is avoided by many due to the discomfort it provokes. In his work, Man and His Symbols, Jung explains that what we deny in ourselves doesn't dissolve, On the contrary, it gains strength in the unconscious and manifests in unexpected ways, such as emotional outbursts, impulsive decisions, or even psychosomatic illnesses. It's as if the shadow, when ignored, screams louder to be heard. A common example of this phenomenon is projection. When we become deeply irritated by someone we perceive as arrogant, it may be that we're projecting our own difficulty in dealing with the self-confidence we've repressed. If we judge someone as selfish, we might be denying our own legitimate need to care for ourselves. Projection is a defense mechanism that allows us to point fingers at others instead of looking inward. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean giving in to these impulses uncontrollably, but rather recognizing them without judgment and understanding how they can be channeled positively. For instance, repressed aggressiveness can transform into assertiveness. Denied vulnerability can pave the way for more genuine connections. Thus, the shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally in building a more conscious and balanced life. For Carl Jung, the process of individuation, becoming who we truly are in our entirety, depends directly on confronting the shadow. He stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This idea challenges the common view that personal growth is solely about cultivating positive qualities or achieving an idealized state of perfection. In reality, genuine self-knowledge requires us to face our imperfections, fears, and hidden desires, for it is in this dive into the darkness that we find the true light of who we are. Joseph Campbell, in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, reinforces this perspective by describing the hero's journey as a process that inevitably involves confronting the inner monster. Every hero, whether in ancient myths or our modern lives, must descend into the abyss of their weaknesses before emerging stronger and more whole. In practice, this means that recognizing the shadow isn't just about accepting flaws, but about reclaiming neglected parts of ourselves that hold transformative potential. For example, someone who represses their shyness out of fear of seeming weak might, by embracing it, discover a unique sensitivity that enriches their relationships. Likewise, a person who avoids their ambition out of fear of judgment might, by integrating it, find the courage to pursue their dreams. Shadow integration also frees us from automatic behavioral patterns that keep us trapped. When we deny aspects of ourselves, we act reactively, driven by unconscious impulses. But by bringing them to light, we gain the autonomy to decide how we want to express them. A leader who represses their insecurity, for instance, might compensate with authoritarianism. By acknowledging it, they can transform it into humility, becoming a more empathetic guide. Thus, the shadow is not an obstacle to self-knowledge, but the key that unlocks the door to a more authentic, conscious life aligned with our deepest purpose. Facing the shadow is a daunting task because it requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It's easier to distract ourselves with routine, work, or entertainment than to look directly at what frightens or shames us. Jung warned, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." This suggests that our discomforts are mirrors of what we avoid in our own psyche. If someone feels bothered by another person's confidence, for example, it might signal that they're repressing their own ability to assert themselves. The fear of confrontation, therefore, is the great obstacle that keeps us trapped in a limited version of who we are. Mark Manson, in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, addresses this resistance head-on. Accepting hard truths is the first step toward a more meaningful life. Avoiding the shadow may feel comfortable in the short term, but in the long run, it condemns us to a superficial existence marked by impulsive reactions and chronic dissatisfaction. The fear of discovering flaws or forbidden desires leads us to build a facade, a persona, as Jung called it, that protects us from judgment, but also distances us from our essence. The problem is that maintaining this facade requires constant energy, resulting in exhaustion and a sense of disconnection. Overcoming this fear demands courage and patience. It's a gradual process of self-observation where we begin to question why certain situations or people affect us so deeply. If we feel anger towards someone who seems manipulative, for instance, we might ask, am I also afraid to acknowledge my own power to influence? Confronting the shadow isn't about self-blame, but about liberation, turning fear into a bridge to self-knowledge. Integrating the shadow isn't just about accepting it, it's about transforming it into a source of power and authenticity. In Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes highlights how our instinctual impulses, often repressed, carry a wild energy that, when reclaimed, connects us to creativity and inner strength. Anger, for example, doesn't have to equate to destruction. It can be channeled into setting clear boundaries or defending what we believe in. Similarly, envy, rather than corroding us, can become a guide pointing to what we truly desire for our lives. This process requires letting go of the idea that we should only display good qualities. Accepting the shadow means embracing our humanity in all its complexity, recognizing that light and darkness coexist within us. An artist who represses their insecurity might limit themselves to predictable works. By embracing it, they can create something deeply original, touched by vulnerability. Transforming the shadow into strength is, therefore, an act of psychological alchemy. We take what seems base and transmute it into gold. Integrating the shadow is a practical exercise that can be woven into daily routines. First, practice self-observation. Set aside a few minutes each day to note situations that triggered intense emotions like anger, envy, or shame, and reflect on what they reveal about you. Second, use mirroring. When you admire or criticize someone, ask how that quality manifests or is repressed in your own life. Third, step out of your comfort zone. Face small challenges like speaking in public or voicing an unpopular opinion to reclaim dormant parts of your personality. Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Consistent practice is what turns theory into real change. The purpose of life isn't a fixed goal to be achieved, but a living process of self-discovery. Integrating the shadow allows us to live authentically, accepting our totality, light and darkness alike. As Jung taught, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others. This path isn't easy, but it's liberating. And have you taken the first step toward facing your shadow?